Hello and welcome to the Rank and Report football show from a snowy cabin in upstate New York to London, England. I'm your host, Adam Booker, and I'm joined, as I always am, by Charlie Gordon. How you doing, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm in London, England for now, but I'm actually leaving tomorrow. I'm going to be back in Kidderminster for Christmas, so you're going to have to practice your pronunciation on that one for the next episode.
It's a bit more
But yeah, I'm all
it's a bit
right.
more exciting to say than London, but I move around so much in these episodes that I just forget where I am half of the time. So
Yeah,
at least you're stationary.
yeah, I'm
Um,
just excited to be somewhere different. Excited to have a little bit of flavour in the intro. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good because we are discussing a team that many of our followers and subscribers want us to discuss. Given that a lot of people are driven our way through City Extra, we're a pair of City fans. We don't hide it. But obviously, We're going to discuss them not in the kind of circumstances that many people wanted us to discuss them.
yeah,
But it's just the way it is, isn't it?
yeah.
It's just the way it is.
No, with our rankings, I've been like every single week with a new ranking show, I've been just trying to find a way to just stick City in there, but they keep giving us reasons not to. So unfortunately, the only way we could fit them in was with our one of our two biggest disappointment clubs of the season. In fact, we've actually got two English teams this week. We'll start with City before we get on to the next one, but um, yeah, it is disappointing, for lack of a better word, to finally be talking about them, but only in this way. So, um, I mean, let's get right into it. Let's talk about it. They coming off the back of a rough season last year, in which obviously Liverpool ran away with the title. It felt like maybe this summer they would kind of gear back up for another title push. And obviously Pep is still around, and now he has this new contract extension, which is another thing we could talk about in a bit. But it felt like maybe they would go fix the glaring issues and kind of be a wounded beast, or so I thought they would, and it just hasn't worked out that way so far, has it?
No, not at all. I mean, I was in the same boat as you. I thought, let's draw a line under last season. We lost the title to the better side. That was Liverpool. Let's go again this season. Start with a clean slate. Try and match them toe to toe. And I did have a lot of belief that that was going to happen. But we kind of, do you know what? We started the season reasonably well. Man City, I'm talking about here, obviously. Started the season fairly well. Few exciting performances. I remember Wolves away being one in particular, which was like, yeah, we're playing pretty well here. Um, but it was always kind of peppered with a couple of really lackluster performances. And in recent weeks, the development has been that they're all lackluster performances. It's not even like good and bad anymore. It's just constantly underwhelming, uninspiring performances. Do you not think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Let's get into why those performances have been lackluster. It's a bit confusing because it seems like they've done a complete flip flop on what their issues are. Because obviously, for basically most of Pep Guardiola's reign at City, the issue has been in defense. I mean, obviously, the 2018-19 title winning season, they were better in defense with Vincent Company, and obviously a full season of Emerick Laporte. Well, they did have him out with injury for a lot of it, but they go out in the summer, they sign Ruben Dias, they sign Nathan Ake. John Stone seems to be coming back into form a little bit, but now all of a sudden the goals have completely dried up. Um, they right now they lead the Premier League, with 22 big chances missed. So they're still creating chances, but they're not taking any of them. I think a big part of that is the lack of a focal point in the attack. Obviously, Sergio Aguero's been injured pretty much all of this season, and I don't know what are your thoughts on Gabriel Jesus, because when I watch him play in these games where teams are going to sit in and City are going to have 75 plus percent possession of the ball, it feels to me like he's not the target man that Aguero is. And if he's not pressing and causing chaos and stuff, then it's basically like playing with three wingers up front.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I'm going to say about Gabby Jesus is at the moment he's not very good at football. He's just not very good. It's annoying because I was a big fan. I still am a big fan, deep down, and I was willing him all the way to succeed. And then there came a point where You said on Twitter that he adds nothing to the game, and I kind of jumped to his defense, saying, actually, I think his hold-up play has been a lot better recently. He looks a lot better on the ball. He's kind of better at making it stick up front. He's not just a poacher. He can actually kind of hold on to the ball and do a little something with it. But since then, even that side of his game has gone. And now I'm kind of being converted the other direction in that I don't think he's good enough to replace Aguero now. I think you can't argue with that anymore. There's concrete evidence, months and months of evidence. It's not a small sample. It's definitely a big enough sample of games to determine that he's not anywhere near as effective as Aguero. And yeah, it's hard to put your finger on why, really. But he's, we've had him up there. City have had him up there for a good 6, 7, 8 months most of the time, whilst Aguero's been out. And he's not got the goals, and he's not contributing to the play in the same way that Aguero does. So City have got a big problem there. And if Aguero's injuries are going to persist, then they need to address it big time.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the games that he's done really well, and it's games where City are not dominating the ball. You look at both legs against Real Madrid in the Champions League last year, and he was brilliant. He was probably the best player on the pitch in both legs, and that's because Real Madrid is going to have, or try to have a lot of the ball. They'll play out from the back, and he is great at pressing, causing chaos, winning the ball back, holding it up, and getting players in around him. But the formula for beating Manchester City is sit in, make it tough for them to break through you, and then break and score. And even the bigger clubs are doing that these days. So it kind of renders Gabby Jesus useless. But moving on from him, in a more general sense, if we look at where City are right now, they're sitting in 9th. They do have a game in hand, it's worth mentioning, but they're sitting in 9th with 20 points. They've got 18 goals scored, and they've been scored on 12 times. That's only a +6 goal difference between through, I believe, 12 games. That is not usual for a Pep Guardiola side at City, Bayern Munich, or Barcelona. If we're taking just these 12 games as our data so far, on that trajectory, they would finish with about 60 points. Under Guardiola, they finished with 81, 98, and 100. That 60 points would be the worst points output since the 2008-9 season. So my question, and this is a question that I wrestle with, this keeps me up all night. I've got cold sweats thinking about it every night.
I feel like it's a massive question. Was
the renewal, 2-year renewal of Pep Guardiola's contract in smack dab in the middle of the club's worst run of games since the Sheikh Mansour takeover a good idea?
God, it's a huge question. It's a huge question. The thing is, Guardiola has achieved legend status at Man City. It's as simple as that. And he's the best manager that we've ever had. He's created one of the best teams that the Premier League has ever seen. And on that basis, it feels like firing Pep Guardiola is something you don't do. It's something a club should never really consider. But this must be probably one of the roughest patches Guardiola's had in his entire managerial career. So it's kind of uncharted territory. It's the kind of territory where the board members are thinking, what is the right decision here? And I think the timing was off, to be honest with you. I agree with you. I think it's just very strange timing. But maybe they thought that was going to give Guardiola and the team the kick that they needed to kind of restart again. Obviously, it hasn't really panned out that way, but everyone's desperate for Guardiola to succeed because we know what the club, the style of football and the results look like when he is succeeding. So maybe that's all I can put it down to, really. But I don't know. What do you think? Because some of the more fearless City fans do kind of just throw caution to the wind and say, Guardiola's not good enough. Let's get rid of him.
I don't know that I agree with the line that Guardiola is not good enough. Here's my issue, and part of me is just playing devil's advocate to play devil's advocate, but part of me also believes this. If you look at the other clubs he's been at, obviously he's never been at a club this long. I think we're in season number 5 now, and if he stays for his whole contract, it'll be a total of 7. He's never stayed that long anywhere. But we often hear that the reason his teams tend to go dull and he ends up leaving is simply because he and the players get burnt out of the intensity and the just the culture he brings to a club, which is basically we're not going to rest until we've won everything, and that'll burn players out. Especially if you take a look at some of the players that have been here at City under Pep, like Vincent Company, Sergio Aguero, David Silva. These are players that in their time have won so much. And it must be, I can't necessarily speak for those guys, but it must be kind of tiring to have that insane intensity at all times when you've kind of already won everything. And so my fear is just that I get what you're saying about maybe it's kind of the kick in the backside, that extension that they need, but is it also like, oh God, here we go again, another couple years of this and another couple years of my legs hurting, and part of me is a little bit scared that it's just going to continue to keep getting duller and duller and duller, because that's all we've seen from Pep Guardiola being at this long at a club. So I don't know. I'm a bit worried.
Yeah.
The decline is just never going to end because he's kind of burnt this squad of players out, and you're not going to buy 11 new players for him. So
Yeah, I don't think he's got much longer to show that, just to show some signs of life. You can't go in another 10 or 15 games, people are going to realize that this is just the shape of the squad now. This isn't just a bad run of form. So I don't think he's got really long to demonstrate that there is a sign of life in there. But maybe this whole thing is just going to uncover a major string that Guardiola hasn't got in his bow, and that's longevity. That's the kind of thing that Sir Alex Ferguson is the kind of thing that makes you appreciate a manager like Alex Ferguson or Arsene Wenger even more, because I'm sure Ferguson was pretty intense as a manager as well, and they won tons of stuff, but somehow he found a way to make him keep winning and winning and winning. So, it depends whether it's a big challenge for Guardiola, and it's time for him to really show his stripes, because people do put him up there in that stratosphere with those kind of managers. And he's really got a point to prove now. Personally, I would let him prove that point. At this point in the season, I think City, we're not going to win the league. I'm actually just going to say we're out of the title race. With 13 games into the season, we're nowhere near. We're out of the title race, so we've almost got nothing to lose. So I would say, because it's Pep and only Pep, give him the rest of the season, or the majority of the season, to see if he can rectify things. Because if he can't, there's not a ton of managers out there that I think are guaranteed to do a much better job, really.
yeah, I agree with you there. I think the smart thing to do is try and let him figure it out himself, and that's kind of the renewal of his contract kind of shows that is what they want to do. But on the point of Sir Alex Ferguson, a big thing that he did do to keep the success kind of never ending in his time at United is when things got a little bit dull every 3 or 4 years, he would sell his best players and he would get new ones. If you look at, when we hit the fourth season mark last year, if we use this past transfer window as an example, you bring in Ruben Dias, who is proved to be a brilliant signing, fair enough. But you bring in Ferran Torres, who may not come straight into the first team. You bring in Nathan Ake, may not come straight into the first team. So if there is the fear of things going a bit dull because players are burnt out and there needs a bit of refreshing, then signing squad depth players, that's not going to be the renewal of energy that the squad needs. So I'm not saying, go out and sign a Kylian Mbappe or something like that, but there does need to be a refreshing of the squad if you are going to have somewhat of a rebuild. Just signing depth players isn't going to bring enough new energy into the club for this new dullness to change.
Yeah, no, I agree, but it presents a very difficult challenge to the board then. Because do they back Guardiola with money to tell him to go and sign players, even though he's in a bad patch right now? I'm sure that would invite a lot of criticism. Or do they get a new manager in and back him with a load of money? That I mean, I can't answer that, and you can't either. It's just a dilemma that the board are presented with. So, yeah, a lot of questions over City at the moment. No one really knows the concrete correct answer or what's going to happen over the course of this season. And yeah, it's a pretty intense point of debate amongst City fans, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, only time will tell, as I always say. We'll see what the next run of games looks like. Obviously, we're going into the festive fixtures, and a lot of times for teams in a title race, that's a title breaking or a title making stretch of games. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. But let's move on for time's sake to another club. I think there was another English club that you wanted to chat about, and that is Arsenal
Of
Football
course.
Club.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about Arsenal, who are really suffering in the league this season. City are having a bad year. They're down in ninth. Arsenal, slightly lower expectations than City, but they're all the way down in 15th with Mikel Arteta at the helm, who basically came in as the chosen one. You know, the one that the fans wanted, the one that the club were after for a long, long time. And things have just fallen so flat under Arteta at the moment, to the point where Arsenal fans are absolutely despairing. I've got a very good mate of mine who's an Arsenal fan. He said it's worse than anything he's seen in the last, since he's been an Arsenal fan, worse than Emery at his lowest ebb. And that's pretty bad, because the club was pretty sour atmospherically under Emery and Wenger before him. So stuff is really, really suffering at Arsenal at the moment. They can't find their way to goal. And Adam, you're a Premier League fan, but you're not here in England soaking up all that atmosphere and all that kind of belief about Arsenal and where they stand at the moment. So what's your impression of Arsenal and how their season's gone so far?
Well, it's a bit of a confusing one because, you look at Arteta coming in last season, and, they go on to win an FA Cup, and they had a pretty decent end of the season. They obviously had that home win against Liverpool, and it felt like the mood around Arsenal was that finally we have somebody in charge that has an identity, a style of play that they want to implement, and when they are backed and when we get the right players in their positions, that the club is going to skyrocket, because that's really what they've been lacking in the past, maybe even a decade, is that there's just really not been an identity and no clear direction from the board and the manager. But they come into this season, and it feels like it started off really well. They signed Willian in the summer. He gets a goal and I think 2 assists in their opening day win at Fulham, and everybody was riding on a high, and then they completely fell off. There's a complete lack of creativity. Obviously, there's no Mesut Ozil, and what's crazy about that situation, I mean, he's never going to take the field again for Arsenal. But the technical director, Edu, I believe his name is, and speaking in an Arsenal fan forum earlier this week, he said it's clear that a quote unquote a player with creativity in the middle is needed. Now, imagine being an Arsenal fan and knowing that arguably the best creative midfielder you've had at the club in 10 years is just sitting at home collecting a paycheck. That's got to be pretty tough to take. But the biggest thing for me is you got to look at the board. I think Mikel Arteta has not properly been backed. If he comes in, he has a style of play, then they had the big switch of making him the manager instead of the head coach, and therefore he's now got some say in the transfers. But all he gets in the summer is 34-year-old Willian and Thomas Partey, who looks like a really great signing, but go on.
Sorry, I really didn't want to cut you off mid-sentence there, but I hate to disagree. I think he's not been backed to the point where he's expected to win the league or even be nailed on top 4 finishers, but people recognise Arsenal are an extremely top-heavy team. Their attack's great. Aubameyang, fantastic, absolute goal-getter, goal machine. Lacazette in behind him is a classy player as well, can score goals, can set up goals. And they signed Willian on a big contract at great expense to the club. So look, their attack is nothing really to be concerned about, or it shouldn't be. Anyway, on paper, it shouldn't be. But he was backed to kind of get a new spine to the team. And there he got Gabriel, the new centre-back Brazilian guy. I think you forgot about him, but he's come in as their best centre-back now. You know, he's looking like a good player, good on the ball, reasonable defensively as well. And then also Partey is a massive addition to their team. He comes in as the main centre midfielder, even though he's not really cemented himself there yet, but he's showing a lot of ability already. So brand new centre back, which is the best at the club, brand new centre mid, which is the best at the club. I think he has been back to get a new spine to the team, which should allow him to rebuild from there, really. But obviously it hasn't panned out that way. Sorry, Adam, you can continue.
No, it's fine. I think something you bring up there is that, yes, they're a top-heavy team, but they create absolutely no chances. Which to me is the biggest issue this season. You know, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is the best attacking player on the team. Obviously, there was a lot of worry he wouldn't sign a new contract. He gets a new contract. He gets a big pay rise. He had 22 Premier League goals last season. He's currently on pace to finish with 9 this year. So those have completely dried up. Now, whether those have dried up because of systemic reasons or because he is not putting in the same performances as last season or the season before, that's a whole other question. But it's a top-heavy team, but if that heavy top is not producing anything, then what you've got is just a completely flat team. And that's what we're seeing. You know, you're losing at home to Burnley. They're 19th in chances created in the league. This is Arsenal Football Club. I hate the whole, this is blank football club. But you look at the staple of this team in basically all of the 2000s. It's creative football. It's good to watch. It may not always bring the best results, but it's good to watch. They score a lot of goals. The ball is moved quickly. But this is just like London Burnley at this point.
Yeah. That's a great comparison. Yeah. I mean, it's so flat in attack. And when like you say, when you've got a top-heavy team and the top is not producing results, that is a recipe for disaster. Because what can you rely on? They've been relying on Aubameyang to carry that team for at least a season, probably more than a season. And now that Aubameyang isn't producing, they're in big trouble. And like you said, I think it is systemic reasons, because even now, if you put Aubameyang in front of goal, he will finish the chance. That's not the issue. It's that he's not really getting into those positions anymore. And to segue into a slightly different direction, but it is on the topic of what you mentioned already, Arsenal's financial decisions haven't been good. I don't know if they're just getting really unlucky or someone's just making poor decisions. Aubameyang has gone on that massive contract and his performances have dipped. I don't know whether you can really blame that on anyone. It's just an unfortunate coincidence. Mesut Ozil, crazy contract. I think he's on something like £375,000 a week, which is ridiculous. And for the majority of that contract, he's been nowhere near the pitch. So he's costing them an absolute fortune. And then they've signed Willian on a £200,000 plus contract for 3 years until he's 35, and he's not really produced the results either. So they're just money being absolutely drained from Arsenal Football Club with very little reward to show for it. So even now and in the future, is kind of the projections are looking bleak for Arsenal. They've got a little bit of a hole that they need to dig themselves out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of my issue with thinking that this could be a problem at boardroom level is obviously you say there's all these, financial decisions that are gone completely wrong. And I want to bring up a quote that I read in, I think it was James McNicholas and David Ornstein's article in The Athletic about Arsenal's season up to this point. And the line they used was, "Sometimes it requires a fresh pair of eyes to tell you who you really are." And when I look at this club now, who is that fresh pair of eyes? Because you bring in a manager who was at the club as a player for 5+ seasons, captained the club, he loves Arsenal with all of his heart. And it feels like to me that bringing an Arsenal legend back to the club to manage it, you are just breeding more content and familiarity, and there's no one to come in and say from the outside and say this is what is wrong with this club, and if it is to get back to the days of winning titles and competing in the latter stage of the Champions League, this is what has to change. Instead, you bring in a guy that has been there, been a part of the culture, and so far it looks to me like he's not going to be the guy to change the culture. So I don't know. I thought that line was really interesting because if you feel like, the club needs a fresh pair of eyes, Mikel Arteta is not that fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah, and he came in as a real favourite, and that's the only reason he's still there, is because people had so much belief that he could turn the club around. And that's why he's been given so much time. And that's why I think he will be given 1 or 2 more games, but that's it. He's hanging by a thread. Really is, because the fans are getting so upset and they're trying not to direct it at Arteta because they love him. They wanted him and now they've got him. But, it's a matter of time because they can't just put up with these performances. And, they went into that game at the Emirates against Southampton, and I expected them to lose. And that's just a mark of how far Arsenal have fallen, really.
Yeah. All right. I think just to wrap up this conversation, what at this point, sitting in 15th with 14 points, if they were to turn this season around, what would be a successful season for Arsenal?
If they're in and around the top 6 conversation, they don't need to break. I mean, at this point, breaking into the top 6 would be a massive achievement. But if they're, there or thereabouts by the end of the season, that would be a success. And I want Arteta and Arsenal to succeed. I used to love Arsenal back in the day, the Invincibles, Thierry Henry, plenty to love about Arsenal. So I'm willing them to do it. I'm willing Mikel Arteta as Pep's former assistant to be a success as well. What do you think?
I think I'm right there with you that if they can get back to top 6, maybe top 8, the issue for Arsenal is that it's not 2010 anymore. There's not just 3 or 4 competitive teams in this league. There's 6, 7, 8 competitive teams in this league. You've got to now jump over the Wolves, the Leicesters, even teams like Aston Villa that are playing really well this season. So there's a lot of competitive teams now, and they're going to have to win some big, big games to get back up into that top 6. And it feels like to me there is not enough spine in this team to do that. So we'll see. Like you said, Mikel Arteta is definitely on the hot seat. I don't know where they would go if he was to get the sack, but I think finishing in top 8 maybe would be a successful season.